And I'm looking in there, and this part of the frame is gone. So there's a lot of repairing that's gonna have to be done in this whole area. Little did I know then what a lot of repairing really meant. But in this episode, we'll be getting it all rust-free and fixed up. And if you're interested in this kind of content, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, as there are new episodes every Wednesday and Sunday. Now let's get right into the work. The frame no longer exists here. Oh, and check out the old battery tray. I don't even know what this is. Cut here, come straight down, and go like that. After having a good look around the engine bay, I decided a good starting point would be the rear valence. When looking at it from the outside, you could see that it was starting to pit through around here. So I got to work. We've got all the lower spot welds out. They're pretty easy to see. Up here, you can see 1, 2, 3, 4. You can see a few, but then it's just all this rust. So my hope is that if I remove these spot welds, those are so rusty, I could just pull this out. Why do people treat their buses like shit and let this happen?
If whoever did this is watching this, just know you killed the bus.
Well, it looks like somebody needs a new rear valence. Oh, I see. I'll have to cut that spot weld. All these look like spot welds, all the damn rust pits. Like what? Where do I drill there? So we've got the outer rear valence off. Not sure if I'm gonna replace it or patch it yet. About a year has passed since these initial clips, and I've done all kinds of repairs, from swapping the roof and replacing the floor, to building a rotisserie, replacing the rockers, and welding on a new nose. So the time has come to get back to repairing the rear end, as we are reaching the end of the body repair tunnel, or a race, or whatever it is. The rust was just as bad, or maybe worse than I had remembered it being, but I bought some replacement parts between then and now, and at this point I wasn't exactly sure where I was gonna start, so I started cutting out rusty metal. After something I've learned about cutting out rusty metal, it's that you want to cut out less. Less is more. I finally bought myself an air hammer, and boy is this the best 15 bucks I've ever spent. With the old rusty engine bay skin out of the way, I could get to wire wheeling things and cleaning them up, kind of get an idea of where the rust ends, so I could cut out the least bit of frame metal as possible. If I would have been doing this repair maybe a year ago, I probably would have just cut it all off, but I've learned a lot since then, and I want to keep as much of the original frame as possible. It just makes it a lot easier to line things up. Cutting it at an angle, I don't know if there's like engineering behind that. I've seen a lot of people cut at an angle when they're doing a structural repair. There's probably some kind of science to it, triangles or something. As you can see, this part of the frame is actually made up of 2 parts. So my plan is to keep the inside part of the frame to kind of line up the outside one when I put it on. This will keep everything straight and true. So I did my best to clean up the rust using OSPO and a wire wheel to see how much metal could actually be saved. Thankfully, it was in pretty good conditions compared to the outside one. Now, this is a very common rust area because people tend to not take care of their battery tray area, whether it be the acid or the water building up in there, and it just kind of starts to spread to the frame. Now, I had a really bad case of this rust cancer, but thankfully, it's not that difficult to repair as long as you take your time and make sure you cut less, because remember, less is more. I've got to be honest, I've still to figure out the best way to transcribe a piece that I cut off onto the replacement panel. This was my best attempt at doing it, because, you know, measuring things that you cut and then accounting for the blade width or the cutoff wheel width and all that kind of stuff, that's a lot of math, and I like to measure once, cut twice. Thankfully, it fit decently, and it wasn't the worst cut I've ever done, but now it's time to cut off the rear valence. My plan is to brace half of the rear valence from here to here, and then cut it off somewhere along here. Now, the reason I'm doing this is because I don't want to cut out the entire inner rear valence. This might have been what I would do in the past, but I have learned a lot since then, and like I said earlier, it is easier to line things up if you keep as much original metal as possible. So using some OSFO, navel jelly, and a wire wheel, I cleaned it up to see where I could cut it, where I could keep as much of the original metal as possible, and I got to cutting it. If you're enjoying the content you're seeing so far, don't forget to hit that like button down below. Leave a comment, as it really does help out in the algorithm. Let me know what is the repair you're looking forward to the least on your project. I had to use my finger sander to get rid of some spot welds here, as they wouldn't really be drillable, and using my air hammer, my new favorite tool, I was able to repeatedly. Now with the rusty bits cut out, the really rusty bits cut out, we could use it as a template in order to know where to cut on our new inner rear valence. Once again, I am doing my best to transcribe the piece onto the replacement panel, but this is always a little bit more difficult than I anticipate, so I cut a little bit bigger and then trim it down. Well, turned out to fit pretty damn nice. Now we are back to using my favorite Aircraft Stripper Ultra to remove the transport primer off of the piece. Now it was looking like it was about to storm.
Stop it!
Well, it did start storming, a thunderstorm at that, so I got to work in quickly removing the paint and getting back to the inside of my garage where I'm safe and not likely to get struck by lightning. I decided before getting to reassembly that I would patch this little bottom piece of the frame, as it had pitted pretty badly in some spots, almost to the point where it would go all the way through. Thankfully, the rust had not climbed too high on this inner part of the frame, and just a little piece would suffice. I did need to ensure that everything was straight so that the outer part of the frame would clip right over it as it did before, and that everything would stay lined up, and it wasn't very difficult to get done. Once it was tacked into place, I went ahead and cranked my welder up to the hottest setting and ran some weld beads on from the inside. Since I have access to the inside, I figured it'd be easier to just get most of the welding done from this side. I did have to put a few welds on the outside just to ensure that I had a complete seal, ground it down, and then it was looking quite nice. I cleaned up the inside with some OSFO just to ensure that there was no rust left, and you'll see that I'm covering it with weld-through zinc primer. The reason I'm not using epoxy primer here is the fact that I'm going to be welding over the outside of this. It's going to create a lot of heat, and epoxy primer will peel off in the heat. Rather, the zinc primer is meant to be welded through, and in the end of the day, this part of the inside of the frame is all going to be coated in wax oil, so I'm not too worried about rust forming in here. As long as I've neutralized the majority of the rust and have it treated, it should do just fine. Well, I blew the breaker again. I might want to do something about that. Once again, I'm using my welder at the highest setting possible to ensure that I get maximum penetration, because this is a frame piece and it does need to be rather strong, as well, car accidents, towing stuff, I don't know, the bumper attaches here. Once it was all welded up, it came out looking, stock, but unfortunately on the rear valence, it did not have this hole for where the bumper attaches, and well, I haven't had a rear bumper since...
Who would have thought taking a bumper off would be so annoying?
8-9 years ago when I bought the bus. Since the entire bracket where the bumper attaches was missing, I had to go to the driver's side and create a template so that I could make a little spacer tool out of metal. This will kind of show me exactly where the bumper mounts go, as well, I don't know where my bumper mount went, so I'm gonna have to buy a new one. After test fitting my bumper bracket spacer bolt spacing tool thing, you guys know what it does. It worked on the driver's side, so I transferred it over to the passenger side where I'm working and was able to stencil out where the hole goes on the inner valence. I went ahead, removed the inner valence, and I got that hole drilled out, but you would see that this would later reveal an even bigger problem that I had with some of my replacement panels. Now this is something that you have to keep in mind when you're buying replacement panels. None of them are truly perfect. I mean, Gerson's funky green panels come pretty close, but they're not even perfect. There's going to be a bit of modifying that you're going to see being done to this inner D-pillar post, and I'm going to kind of walk you through exactly my thought process. The curve in the back of the inner D-pillar was maybe about 1/4 of an inch off, so I had to rip it down and re-weld it so that the curve would kind of line up a bit better. You'll see how this comes out great later. Another issue was when it was bolted in, it was pushed way too far forward. What I ended up having to do, as you can see, is cut this little strip out and put it on the back side of it. This gave me the correct spacing for where the bumper mounts onto the bracket, and as well as where the D-pillar welds onto the existing D-pillar. I'm not gonna lie, this did take me a while to figure out exactly how I was gonna tackle it, and it was a bit more annoying than just being able to plug and play and weld in your replacement panel. Like I said, you need to expect these kinds of things when you're doing these repairs, because it is pretty common that things don't fit the way that you expect them to. Once everything was mocked up the way that I wanted it to fit, I went ahead and zinc primed the areas that are gonna be behind and inaccessible once they're welded. And now I could finally get to welding in the inner valence. As you can see, it's taken me a long time to get to this step. That is because it is very important that you test fit all the different pieces that you're going to be putting together before you commit to welding anything. Just in case your spacing is a little wrong, you don't have to go back and cut anything out. Trust me, I've made this mistake before. I'm not going to worry about grinding these welds down as they will be hidden on the inside. And now that my inner D-pillar was completely customized and complete, I could also coat it in some zinc weld through primer and get to welding it on. Now, I know this space seems a little big, but trust me, it is the stock spacing. As you can see on the driver's side, this is the way that it's supposed to look, and now things are starting to look really close to stock, which is what I wanted and what I'm always shooting for when I do these repairs. Yeah, it is possible to repair these things just by throwing metal together, but I like things to look good, even if they're hidden. Which totally contradicts what I said 2 seconds ago about those welds hidden on the inside of the inner valence, but we're not going to worry about those.
It's okay.
Nice job, team.
And now for the cherry on top of the pie that is the rear frame repair, the outer D-pillar skin. With this welded on, we could finally admire how beautiful it looks. And now I know that I did not drill out the hole here for where you wax hole it, but you will see that I have another access hole that I'll be using, but I'm not going to be cutting this hole out in my rear corner. So I figured it doesn't really need to be there. I could wax hole it from the other side. Unfortunately, we are running out of time. You can see how beautiful this repair came out. And in the next episode, we'll be working on the rear corner. We have both rear corners to do, battery tray, mud flap thing, and well, I'll see you in the next one.
Hey,